preach on and so Neil's going to deliver the message for us this morning, and thankful that he's going to do it. So let's welcome Neil and allow him to speak.
Good morning. For those of you who don't know, I'm Neil Bakshi. I usually am the one scrolling through the stuff on the computer projections that you see behind me. Originally, I was going to do the children's lesson, but I saw the towel. And if you thought it wasn't going to work with Will, you should have seen it when I tried it. This is more like a bib. But originally, when I, got the job, I don't know how else I'd put it, but it was about Simon Peter. And obviously, me being the devout Christian I am, I did not have the book and did not read it at all before I got it. So that was, it was honestly probably one of the better things that happened to me. The book's been a real joy to read. If you haven't read it yet, there are still copies outside the back, if I remember properly, and I think they're like $15. But if you can't afford it, we have ways to get it to you, because it honestly is really worth a read. In this chapter, we talk about the Passover, the Last Supper that Jesus has, and some of the things that both Jesus and Simon Peter go through before, during, and after. So you're going to have to open your Bibles with me since I'm not back there running it this time. But we're going to turn to Matthew 26:31 on page 1544 in your pew Bibles. So this is a little bit into the Passover. He's already broke the bread. He's already washed his disciples' feet. And basically, this is Jesus predicting that Peter will deny him later. Then Jesus told them, "This very night you will all fall away on account of me, for it is written, I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered. But after I have risen, I will go ahead of you into Galilee." Peter replied, "Even if all fall away on account of you, I never will." "I tell you the truth," Jesus answered, "this very night, before the rooster crows, you will disown me 3 times. But Peter declared, "Even if I die with you, I will never disown you." And all the other disciples said the same. Spoiler alert, Jesus was right. But before we go to that, we have to look at the feet washing. And if you think about it now, if your teacher or pastor or boss kind of came up to you and was like, "Let me wash your feet," you would probably be a bit more confused or scared than you probably would be humbled. But throughout the scriptures and in Hamilton's book, it repeatedly affirms Jesus' belief in being humble, in putting yourself after others, and how the Christian community should be a service-based community, serving others. And when I first thought about what I was going to compare this to, I thought of Humbling Your Pie. And there's a Netflix show, it's called Last Chance University. If you haven't seen it, I don't know if I'd recommend it. It's the coach in the 3rd season says a lot of things that you probably don't want to hear. Yes, that was the selling point. But to put it in a synopsis, they have a lot of hype built around them. They go into the first game. It's a fresh season, and they believe that this man's going to win them after they've been in a losing season for so long. And they go in the first game and they lose like 56-7. And he says that now is the chance to humble your pie. And it really is about our expectations of ourselves and how we tend to think so highly of ourselves. And a lot of the plays they were making were audacious, or it was players who were like, "Don't worry, coach, I got this one. I'm going to make the hero play that saves us the game." And then, the quarterback gets intercepted and they lose 56-7. And he makes them run a lot, and he basically takes them back to the basics, to the fundamentals, not specifically because they were bad at the game. Obviously, you're not bad if you get recruited by a college to play. But he does it to humble them, to bring them back down to earth a little after all this hype that they had. And I feel like in washing their feet, Jesus is trying to bring the same humble approach to his disciples. They view him as this man, so far above where they are, so disconnected. He is the leader of our church. He is the Son of God. He is so far and just above and away from where we could possibly be. And he takes a step back and he goes to something that the servants would do or the lower class would do. He gets down and washes their feet, kind of just to bring himself down to earth with the rest of the disciples. And then afterwards, he predicts Peter's denial, because Peter still has some of that pride in him. He's like, "Lord, the others may desert you, but I never will." And he says, "Before the night ends, you will deny me 3 times." And when it happens, it says on the 3rd time, the crow immediately, crowed. And he immediately began crying. And this was Jesus' chance to humble Peter as well. And kind of, when you look at history, I always thought it was kind of weird that they specifically went on this. Because when you look at history, afterwards Peter does all these courageous things in Acts, and he turns out to be, a great leader for the Christian community. And usually in history, when you have all these leaders, you kind of gloss over some of the negative stuff, right? So when you think of the most famous leaders, you think of like Alexander the Great. Yeah, he never lost a battle. He was great. He also robbed religious tombs. I read a lot of history, so everyone's ruined in my perspective. But usually, it's kind of people chip away at the bad things or the things that we wouldn't be proud of as we go through history. The saying, rose-tinted lens on how we look at them. But interestingly enough, in all 4 of the Gospels that talk about it, they all repeat about Peter saying he won't deny Jesus and then his subsequent denials. And even though they took in and left out particular parts of the story, all 4 of them had Peter's denials in there. So obviously they were trying to tell us something, right? All 4 of them felt it was important enough to point this out. And a lot of people might say, "Oh, well, he just didn't want to get caught. He was a coward." And it's a pretty easy assumption to make. You don't want to get caught for being a Christian when it was kind of dangerous to be a Christian back then. But so Jesus gets arrested, and the first thing Peter does is pulls out a sword and chops a servant of the high priest's ear off, or a part of it. So obviously that's not the actions of what you'd be from an expected coward, right? Why would he pull out a sword? And then when Jesus gets arrested, he follows him to the courtyard where they're holding the trial. And I don't know about you, but if my leader got arrested and we were all kind of fugitives, I don't think I'd be following them to the police station. So he kind of put himself in the fire for Jesus there. That shows courage to me. But then why does he deny Jesus so quickly when he gets called on it, even to a little girl? I spent a while trying to put these two facts together in my head. I'm like, well, why would he at one point be courageous enough to follow Jesus into the fire, into the courtyard, and pull out a sword, and he's ready to die for it? But at the same time, when he gets called out on it, why does he deny it? Hamilton in his book says that when Peter pulled out his sword, Jesus knew that the act could probably get all of them killed, and to deny the disciples the ability to shepherd the flock later. So was Peter doing it to kind of just preserve the word? Was he doing it kind of just to keep himself alive so he could spread the word after? Was it God sending tests or maybe trying to teach him something? I'm not the pastor, so I don't have the answers. But what I do know is that the same things, even though we aren't persecuted these days, the same things can come just as easily. In college, I read a book called Silence. It's by Shusaku Endo. It got made into a movie. I haven't watched the movie, so I can't vouch for how good or bad it is, but I have read the book. Thank you, college. Thousands of dollars well spent. I can use it in a sermon now. But I won't want to bore you, but I'll keep it as a synopsis. Basically, these missionaries come into kind of medieval era Japan, I'd call it, and they get persecuted for being Christians. And at the very end, one of the missionaries who went in had his own kind of flock of early Christians that were Japanese natives, and they caught him and they imprisoned him and they hung his followers and strung him up, and he could hear them moaning from the cell. He could hear them dying from his cell. And at the end, they say, okay, here's what you're going to do if you want to live. We have this thing they call a fume, and it's basically like a little wooden metal kind of bust of Jesus' head put in a square. And they said, you're going to stomp on it, and that'll teach you. That's you renouncing your faith. And if you do that, we won't kill you. And when he's going there, I'll try to read it exactly. And then the Christ in bronze speaks to the priests, trample, trample. I, more than anyone, know of the pain in your foot. Trample. It was to be trampled on by men that I was born into this world. It was to share men's pain that I carried my cross. Have you done any trampling before? Have you ever been in a situation where it's a bit of a disadvantage to say that you were a Christian? Being from a family where half of my family were all Hindus, I have been in this disadvantaged position before. I've been to Hindu temples where openly being a Christian wasn't like the coolest thing around. I've been to India itself, which is very staunchly Hindu. And I've been in situations where I kind of hid the fact that I was a Christian and went to church from other people. I didn't, straight out say, oh no, I don't believe in Christ or anyone, but I kind of hid it from other people, even though Christ sends us with the message to be a light for others. I dimmed my light. I shaded my light. I hid it to avoid being in a bad situation. So, like Peter and like that missionary, I did a bit of my trampling. And I believe for us, it's a learning experience, because courage isn't the absence of fear, and it's not being unwilling to be scared. It's more of going through it. So when I say be courageous, I don't think I mean airdrop myself into India and start a missionary there, because I don't think it'd work. But at the same time, it is the ability to accept the place you're in and accept the fact that even if the people here might not agree with what I believe, I can still be a light to them, and I can still show them my side, even if I'm in a bit of a precarious position. After the dinner, Jesus goes out and he goes to Gethsemane. That rolled off my tongue really well. To pray. And he brings his disciples with him, and he's like, how about you guys keep watch, and I'll go and pray. And he goes and he prays for an hour, and when he comes back, they're all sleeping. And he's like, can you not stay awake an hour for your Lord? Or something around that. Has anyone fallen asleep in church before? Oh, we got some hands. And before you ask, no, I was not in the booth when I did it. Or at least not when Will was here. Don't question me on this. And it's kind of, a lot of the chapter focuses again on that thing of being humble, that we can't be perfect. Because Jesus' closest followers, they were given one task: just sit here, pray with me, and watch me, and they'll fall asleep. And the whole dinner for me kind of took on a new light when I saw how many humbling experiences are there. Because a lot of people, when they think about the Last Supper, they think of, this is my body broken for you, this wine is my blood shed for you. And for me, the circumstances around it point to something else. They point to the courage. They point to the courage to do something, to give up, and to really be steadfast in your pursuit of God. Even when you have moments that you aren't proud of. If you've been here for the last time I spoke a lot about how many of the Old Testament and New Testament heroes, that's kind of a weird word to say, heroes, but a lot of the main subjects that were talked about, like David, Saul, all these people had a lot of things that they did that they weren't proud of. You know, David had hots for a girl. He's like, you know what? I'll just kill off the husband and take her for myself. He did something that, honestly, if any of us did it, we wouldn't really be proud of that either. But he managed to come back from it. When I was younger, I really couldn't reconcile the fact that my father and I had differing beliefs on how the world should work. And that we as Christians believe that if you can't find God's life, then you'll probably end up in hell. And it's easy for us sometimes to, the nameless person that didn't believe, they end up there too. But it can be a lot harder when it's your own father who sired you, who's the person who's destined to do that. He's a staunch Hindu. I'm a Christian. And the conflict in my head led to me for a while in my earlier years to kind of just give up on Christianity, because I felt it was so cruel to have someone so close to me be destined for what was essentially an eternal life in agony. Why? Why, God? Why would you do this to me? Why would you not only give me someone who's not a Christian, but someone who's about as far as ways you can get? It's not just that he doesn't believe, he believes completely in something else that's not even close to Christianity. Someone that, if I'm going to be completely honest, I have probably no chance of converting ever. No chance. It's not like I don't try. Why would you do this to me? Why would you punish those I love? Why would you put them in that situation? So for a while, I just gave up on him. Yeah, I showed up to church. That may have been the time I was sleeping. But I showed up. I was there in body, not in spirit. And I kind of just went through the motions. That was my real Peter moment. That was my I don't believe in God moment. And guess what? I didn't say it to some child. I said it to him. It's not a very proud moment. It's probably not something you'd expect from the person giving the sermon up here. But that's my moment. And I know for a fact that we all here have a Peter moment. It may not be directly saying you're not there, but it's a disconnection from God that you've had. And if you're feeling it right now, all I have to say is that he still loves you, he still cares for you, and he wants you to come back. I found my way back at a chrysalis meeting, which is, if you don't know what that is, it's like Emmaus, and if you don't know what that is, I'm sure there's plenty of people that can explain it for you. But basically, it's a prayer retreat almost. It's a retreat to kind of recharge your batteries. And when I first kind of was asked about going to it, I was still out of it. I still didn't really want to do it. But I'm like, you know what? It'll mollify everyone. You know, maybe it'll get them off my back. So I was like, you know what? I'll do it. And I went, and I showed up the first day, and it was same song and dance in there in body, not in spirit. But it really led to a change. We had a pastor there, and he said, okay, we've done all this. If you have a question, just write it in this little piece of paper and give it to me, and I'll try to answer it the best I can. And I was like, oh boy, do I have a banger for this guy. Get ready, son. Gonna have to work hard on this one. So I wrote down my situation to him, and I could tell which one was mine because he gets it. Eyes go wide. Like, oh crap. So they answer all the other questions, and I'm like, oh, mine's coming up next. It's got to come sometime. And he's like, we have one last question, and he kind of gives a little bit of it without giving everything away. It's like, if you have this question, could you stay here and everybody else can go back? And I'm like, oh crap, I went too deep. The plan's backfiring on me. So I stayed with him, and he's like, and the pastor looked at me, and he's like, yeah, there's nothing you can do. You can't change the law and just make exceptions to add people in. And out of respect for him, I won't say, but he was kind of in a similar situation that I was. So by coincidence, God gave me someone that was sympathetic to what I had been through. So we sat there, we talked together, we cried together, and that was my rooster crowing. That was my chance to see the light, to come back to him. When will your rooster crow? If you're feeling like Peter right now, if you feel like you're denying him, if you feel disconnected, when will your rooster crow? What will it take for your rooster to crow? Do you need someone to talk to? Because trust me, if you got problems, I know all about them. You're surrounded by a church family that is full of humans, which means we're not perfect. We've all had problems. My crow was talking to somebody else about it. And I highly suggest, if you're feeling disconnected in your life, speak up with someone. Maybe it's Will. Maybe it's me if I'm not sleeping in the booth. Maybe it's Leroy. Maybe it's any of the other loving, caring people who are out here that can relay with you what they've been through. I always felt a bit of a pull, even though I was disconnected. But I kind of refused to act on it because I was like, no, I'm not doing this. Follow that pull. See where it'll take you. See where it'll lead you. And while I'm not saying it'll turn you into a Peter who revolutionizes the whole industry, it's really given me a chance to illuminate others. You know, I wouldn't be up here if I was still disconnected. I'm paying back God one step at a time right now. This is my repentance. Gotta check the notes now. And speaking of what Peter did after, there are plenty of chances to be a Peter yourself. And I wouldn't recommend going through the less admirable traits of him, but you can. It's a chance for you to do something it's a chance to do something when you're reconnected. You know, I got the chance to run the sound, which is my small way to contribute, but the church needs your help. You heard about the Easter thing. As far as I know, there's still people for the nursery. There's people in our community who come for events that give us a chance to illuminate them. How will you represent Peter? And while I'm not saying you airdrop yourself into the middle of a hostile country and, you know, start preaching the virtues of God, that's a little extreme. Maybe take a small step. After Chrysalis, my small step was just volunteering to just help out every once in a while with chores, with things, just volunteering to serve a little. Like Pastor Will said to the children, I didn't do dishes because if you saw my dishwasher organization, you wouldn't be impressed. But I took small steps to try and serve those around me a little bit more. And maybe that's the first step for you. Maybe the first step is just trying to reconnect. But